Alright you guys, so in this video we are going to talk about inverse functions. So we went over this in class before, we're just going to go over it again. Inverse function, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background, but what it does, it reverses what some function does. So it's like if you step forward to, going back to will be the inverse. Okay, so it's like rewind, undo, let's go back to where you started. So that's essentially the idea of an inverse function, and I'm going to show you guys how to find the inverse function algebraically. So we're going to begin. I'm looking at this function already. It is -6 open parentheses x minus 2 close parentheses. So when I see these parentheses, what is your instinct? What is your instinct? I would hope that your instinct is to use the distributive property to sort of simplify this expression and make it more easy to work with in terms of finding the inverse. Alright, so I'm going to take this, I'm just going to distribute, and what happens, -6 times x gives us -6x, and then -6 times -2 gives us a positive 12. Alright, so since we have a positive 12 and -6, now this is the f of x that we're going to be dealing with. So, first thing when you're finding the inverse function is to write it in terms of y. So, use y. Use y, we're going to use y. So instead, I'm going to write this as y equals -6x plus 12. So now, I'm going to swap. Second step is to swap. Swap x and y. I mean, this could intuitively make sense because you're sort of reversing and undoing. You're putting the beginning where the end is, and the end where the beginning is. So this is sort of the idea, and that's how you know you're finding the inverse of a function. So now I'm going to swap it and put this as x equals to -6y plus 12. Alright, so now that I swapped x and y, the last step is to, who remembers? The last step is to solve for y. Now get y by itself. Well, this is like the second to last step. There's like one baby step after this. Alright, so 3 is to solve for y. Now we're going to get y by itself, and we're going to do the order of operations backwards. So first I'm going to subtract the 12. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to both. So I'm going to subtract the 12 over here. It cancels, and this side, since these two terms are not like terms, we're going to keep them separate and bring this side down. Alright, so there's one more thing. We have to just divide by -6. We're going to divide by -6. Of course, on both sides. So this -6 cancels. Let me move out the way. So the -6 cancels, and we're left with x minus 12 over -6 equals to y. So I did mention that there was one tiny little step at the end after all this, and that step is to use function inverse notation. So we're going to use inverse notation. And what does that look like? What does it look like? It looks like it's an exponent of -1. So it should look like this. So instead of having an f of x, because this is the reverse function, we're going to put it as f inverse of x. So our final answer will be f inverse of x equals to x minus 12 over -6. Now, some of you might be asking, Can we simplify this further? And there is a yes question because of the fact that this negative 12 and negative 6, they share a common factor. So what we would do is use what I like to call the pretzel. We have to divide the x term with the negative 6, which will actually give us x over negative 6. And then when we divide the 12 over negative 6, we actually get plus 2. So this is another way that you can write your function. If on the regions they ask you to determine the inverse and you're not sure if you were to continue dividing like so, I would always do it, but it is a tricky step to do that. I would personally use the pretzel every single time that there's common factors between something up here and something down there. So these two had common factors, so you use a pretzel. Okay, you use that pretzel to divide both terms in the numerator by the 1 in the denominator. You have to use both terms. You have to divide both terms, and this is where it's able to happen, where you could simplify to a positive 2, a plus 2. So we're done. Guys, this is how you find the inverse of a function, and no matter what the case is, you must follow these 4 steps. Use y instead of f of x, swap your x and y variables, solve for y, and then go back to use your function notation.